order and ask that the media please stop recording. Thank you. Welcome to meeting number 133 of the House's Common Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. I'd like to remind participants of the following points. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. All comments should be addressed through the chair. Members, please raise your hand if you wish to speak, whether participating in person or via Zoom. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can. Before we move on to the supplementary estimates, I had two matters that I quickly wanted to dispose of for the members. Regarding draft budgets, we know that the clerk has distributed two draft budgets, one last week for our study on Indian interference, totaling $21,250, and another yesterday for our current meeting on Sub B, amounting to $500. Are there any questions or comments? It is the will of the committee to adopt both budgets. It is so adopted. Second matter is our draft report on the growing problem of car thefts in Canada. The clerk has distributed on Thursday, November 28th, the new recommendation 42, which was prepared by the analysts, following our in-camera meeting on Tuesday, November 26th. Are there any questions or comments? And is it the will of the committee to adopt the recommendation 42? Madame Michaud.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. I would like to thank the analysts for their work on that recommendation. I don't think it reflects the spirit of the work we did. The areas of jurisdiction of the provinces like Quebec is very important, so it will be difficult for them to accept it. I don't know what the other parties think, but I think I cannot accept those recommendations. Thank you.
I think we can take this conversation offline, perhaps address it another time.
Okay. Then we will come back to the draft report, seeing as there might be debate on it. Okay, so then we're on to today's meeting. Pursuant to order of reference to November 18th, 2024, the committee begins its study of supplementary estimates B 2024-2025. I would like to welcome our witnesses for both hours. From the Canada Border Services Agency, we have Aaron O'Gorman, President, Ryan Pilgrim, Chief Financial Officer. We have the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, Daniel Rogers, Director. We have Jérôme Laliberté, Chief Financial Officer and Deputy Director of Administration. Correctional Service of Canada, Anne Kelly, Commissioner. France Graton, Acting Senior Deputy Commissioner. Tony Matson, Assistant Commissioner and Chief Financial Officer, Corporate Services. From the Department of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, we have Tricia Geddes, Deputy Minister. I apologize if I mispronounced that. Patrick Amiot, Assistant Deputy Minister and Chief Financial Officer. From the Parole Board of Canada, we have Joanne Blanchard, Chairperson. We have Claudine Legault, Chief Financial Officer. And from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, we have Michael Tuhem, Commissioner. We have Samantha Hazen, Chief Financial Officer. Please note that Minister LeBlanc will join the officials for the second hour. I understand that the Department of Public Safety, the RCMP, and CBSA have prepared opening statements. I now invite Ms. Geddes to make an opening statement of up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, and good morning, committee members. Thank you for inviting me to speak today about the Supplementary Estimates B for Public Safety Canada. As many of you know, we are a very busy department that supports a number of agencies, but also our own programs. Our mandate touches on borders, human and drug trafficking, corrections, national security, and emergency preparedness, amongst others. Alors que mes collègues parleront du budget de leur...
While my colleagues will be talking about the budget of their organizations, I'll be talking about programs and activities that fall under the mandate of public safety. The funding we are requesting today will allow our department to continue its work on the most important issues for Canadians.
Today, we are seeking $45.8 million for public safety and the Canada Border Services Agency to continue to combat auto theft. While the numbers in early 2024 showed a decrease of 17% in the number of auto thefts compared to the previous year, we know that criminal networks quickly adapt and we must be prepared. Nous recherchons également des fonds supplémentaires.
We are also seeking additional funds to carry out significant investments in strategies to maintain order, control the borders, and prevent gangs in communities in order to reduce the number of firearms that enter our communities and the number of crimes committed using firearms in the most at-risk communities.
To keep our community safer is through Canada's first ever action plan on combating hate. The action plan includes the Canada Community Security Program. This program replaces the Security Infrastructure Program and provides time-limited funding to private, not-for-profit organizations that are at risk of experiencing hate-motivated crime. Eligible recipients include places of worship, provincially, territorially recognized private educational institutions, shelters for victims of gender-based violence, community centers, cemeteries, childcare centers, and office and administrative spaces. The $14.9 million in budgetary expenditures will allow us to continue this work that has become so crucial, particularly in the face of hate crime that has increased due to geopolitical tensions. Our portfolio also includes emergency preparedness and management. One key component of that work are disaster financial assistance arrangements. These arrangements allow us to provide financial assistance to provinces and territories in the event of large-scale natural disasters, as we did this summer for Yukon flooding and last winter for Nova Scotia following significant snowstorms. This program will continue to be crucial as we see an ever-increasing number of extreme weather events. To that end, we are seeking to reprofile $800 million from a previous year. Mr. Chair and committee members, these are just a few examples, but I once again wanted to thank you for inviting me to speak about the importance of funding to help fulfill Public Safety Canada's mandate of keeping Canada secure for all. Merci.
Great, thank you. I now invite Commissioner Duhem to make an opening statement of up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, honourable committee members. Thank you for providing me the opportunity to speak to you today about the RCMP Supplementary Estimates B for 24-25 fiscal year. As the introduction, I'm here with Sam Hazen, who's our Chief Financial Officer. I'll provide some background on the RCMP and our financial structure, which will help to situate today's discussion Supplementary Estimates B. La GRC est le service de police nationale au Canada.
The RCMP is a complex organization that ensures law enforcement in our provinces and territories and at federal level. We also have international obligations, be it peacekeeping missions, reestablishing partnerships with our partners abroad, particularly those in the Group of Five, the U.S., New Zealand, Australia, and Great Britain. The RCMP has about 32,000 employees. A third are accredited police officers, and others are non-accredited and functionaries. We offer first-line services through hundreds of contracts with our provincial, territorial, and municipal contracts partners and Indigenous people.
Serious and complex criminal threats in Canada in areas such as terrorism and extremists, drugs and organized crime, national security, protective policing, and border integrity. As you're aware, border integrity has been top of mind in recent weeks, and I want to assure members of this committee that we continue to work with our portfolio and law enforcement partners across the country, but as well south of the border, to ensure that we are prepared to address any border concerns. La GRC fournit également des services de police opérationnelle spécialisés.
The RCMP also provides specialized operational policing services to our law enforcement partners, including advanced training, firearms licensing, and investigative and forensic services. I would note that our work in 2024 has built on the significant progress already made to modernize policing services to respond to a constantly evolving threat landscape and to transform the organization's culture to strengthen trust and confidence. This means continuously finding ways to take better care of our employees, treating all those we serve with dignity and respect, and carry out our police work in ways that build trust and confidence.
It takes time, and we know that there is more work to do. Through 2024-25 supplementary estimates B, the RCMP expects to access 721 million, mainly attributed to the following: 440 million for contract policing program to address growth in the contract policing program, enabling the continuance of program delivery. 45.4 million in advanced funding as Canada assumes the presidency of the G7 in 2025 to undertake site visits, initiate security planning and coordination, and begin advanced procurement of security equipment. 26 million in support of providing protective services to public figures. 16 million to support foreign interference in criminal investigation. 7.6 to continue implementing activities that contribute to Canada's migrant smuggling prevention strategy. And 2.4 million to support Canada's continued response to the security crisis in Haiti. With that, I would like to again thank the committee for the opportunity to meet with you, and I'm pleased to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. I now invite Ms. O'Gorman to make an opening statement of up to 5 minutes.
Merci. J'aimerais
Thank you. I'll also like to talk about the funding that was provided for in these supplementary estimates.
a 2021 commitment to recapitalize port infrastructure. The CBSA received approval to build up to 24 new land ports of entry with a budget of $481 million. Ces investissements amélioreront l'expérience des voyageurs qui traversent la frontière.
These investments will improve the situation at the borders, provide agents improved technology, and support safety measures. The CBSA receives $23.1 million in this supplementary budgets B to help with planning and to start construction work at Saint-Bernard-de-la-Côte.
Infrastructure improvements in Fraser, British Columbia, Bloomfield, New Brunswick, and Saint-Orly, Quebec, ports of entry. Deux autres points d'entrée sont en cours.
Two other entry points are on the way, Saint-Bernard-de-la-Côte and Wildhorse.
National Action Plan to Combat Auto Theft outlines steps that we are taking to disrupt, dismantle, and prosecute organized crime. It builds on the successes and collaborative efforts with our provincial, territorial, municipal, and industry partners following the National Summit on Combating Auto Theft held last February. La première mise à jour trimestrielle.
The first quarterly update of the plan was published on the 6th of October.
CBSA has intercepted more than 2,100 stolen vehicles, which already surpasses last year's total of 1,806. Nous travaillons en étroite collaboration.
We are working in close collaboration with the competent police forces. We are joining efforts and carrying out joint efforts and sharing information within intelligence groups.
$1 million in supplementary estimates includes funding to enhance our intelligence capacity, put border service officers at the rail yards in the Greater Toronto Area, increase the number of export exams we undertake, and assess new technologies, among other things. Finally, the CBSA is accessing $2.1 million for a market watch unit for trade remedy measures. With this funding, CBSA will regularly update normal values to make sure that duties accurately reflect current levels of dumping. Voici les principaux points du budget supplémentaire de défense de la.
Those are the main points of the supplementary budgets B of the CBSA. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I now open the floor up to questions. It's the first round. Ms. Stancho for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all the officials for being here. Certainly, it's welcome to see you all. And we certainly have issues in our country facing that concern every single one of you, and we appreciate your hard work. But certainly top of mind has been the threat of the 25% tariffs from President-elect Donald Trump and the impact, or certainly related to the border security. So I would like to speak with Ms. O'Gorman on your department and the challenges that you're facing, in particular in between ports of entry. What efforts have you made in the last week to ensure that there's more surveillance beyond the ports of entry themselves?
So I can happily speak to the efforts of the CBSA when it comes to port security, and I'll say a few words and then defer to my colleague, the Commissioner of the RCMP, who has the mandate between the ports. But just to say, we work closely every day with our U.S. counterparts in terms of securing our shared border, and we exchange information With them, operationally, we are embedded in their targeting centers, and we are awaiting an embedded officer from the CBP to come and join our targeting center in the near future. We speak regularly at the head of agency level, but more importantly, every day at the officer level. So I have recently, probably a year ago now, appointed an executive director, operational officer responsible for combating firearms, and a separate executive director responsible for combating opioids.
Thank you. If I may, the union president of the Customs and Immigration Union has mentioned that some of the frustrations for policing the border with our frontline officers is, just to quote him, he said that there is a situation, is so silly to quote him now, that if an officer, if they're sitting at one of the workplaces and they see someone crossing just off to where the port is, they have to call the RCMP. So it seems that there is frustration with our border officers that they literally are seeing someone go just right out of their jurisdiction and they can't apprehend them. Can you comment on those challenges?
Sure. I will say that that has never been raised to my attention. And so this was new information to me when I read it in the paper. And so as we meet with our officers at land and air ports of entry and marine ports, we often talk about the challenges, talk about how we can better support their work, move resources around to face the changing threats that they're seeing. It hasn't been raised to my attention. If that is an issue, happy to undertake the work that it would take to address any legislative constraints. That would obviously be up to Parliament to make any final determination there. So open to anything that makes us more effective at the border, but this is not something that I've...
Thank you, Ms. O'Gorman. You had mentioned earlier that you are aware, of course, that the jurisdiction for CBSA is not in between the ports. That's the RCMP. So you are aware of those limitations, of course. And certainly we've seen reports from the U.S. Border Patrol about well over 20,000 people crossing between those ports of entry into the United States. So certainly this is an issue that is known in that regard. So to the Commissioner of the RCMP in particular, you've taken, of course, the RCMP has the responsibility between ports of entry. I have concerns about the limitation of our staffing numbers to police 9,000 kilometers of border without the CBSA supporting those efforts between the ports. I believe there's recently been an announcement that 25% of Atlantic Canada RCMP officers will be moved to the border. Is that a correct assessment of that announcement or of that media report?
I don't recall positioning myself for the organization at 25%. Deputy Commissioner Flynn might have, but the important thing is to understand is we do have that surge capacity within the organization. We saw it in events with Roxham Road, where we mobilized our folks from Montreal, some investigation teams, to the border, and now these people have gone back to the respective units, and actually the people who are assigned to the border are actually covering more of the border now that nobody's coming into Roxham Road, so we can spread those people apart.
Appreciate that very much, and certainly the RCMP officers and our border officers work very, very hard and very grateful for their courage and dedication to the job. My concern is that the RCMP is facing staffing issues across the country, particularly in rural and northern Canada. So if the idea is to pull from those resources, would that not endanger, say, rural Manitoba, which I know my home province does face RCMP staffing issues, and we do have border crossers between our many kilometers between our ports of entry in that regard. So wouldn't there be a concern for those local communities if those RCMP resources were pulled and put in between the ports?
It's well known the staffing issues that we're addressing right now. I would like to highlight the fact that I've been working closely with public safety and the minister to acquire new technology to reduce the impact on resources, so we can rely more on technology and reduce. I'm not going to say reduce the footprint, but use human resources accordingly to the latest technology that we have for the border.
Thank you, Ms. O'Gorman. Will there be more boots on the ground in the next 6 weeks at the border? More officers to help these efforts?
So will we be?
Correct.
So we're always, like I said, moving our resources around to where the threats are. So we have the ability to staff according to volumes, which does give us a flexibility. And there's an impact every time we move people around, potentially in terms of wait times, but we have established wait time commitments, and we can change those if the threat increases. So I'm not worried about our ability to move people around, and in fact, we're actively doing that right now, looking at potential risks relating to a northern border surge. We haven't seen those numbers increase at all at the ports of entry, but we have people who would be reassigned from where they are to be moved, and we do that every summer. So we do that on a regular basis.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Nacho. Ms. Zahid for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to all the witnesses. My first question is for the Department of Public Safety to Ms. Geddes. Funding in these estimates has been set aside for the new Canada Community Safety Program and the Canada Centre for Community Engagement and Prevention of Violence. Can you speak and let us know about how the new Canada Community Safety Program builds off the success of SIP to keep communities at risk of experiencing hate safe? And also, can you tell us about the important work Canada Centre is doing, especially in the counter-radicalization space?
Sure. Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the question. I mentioned a little bit in my opening remarks, happy to elaborate a bit. This is a really important program, so successful last year in terms of the uptake by community leadership that we made some important modifications to the security infrastructure program and brought them forward in the new Canadian Community Security Program. So there's some important changes that have been made. In particular, it allows for us to be able to support communities if they need to hire security guards, for example. So we have had a really impressive reaction to this program. I will say it's unfortunate that it is required. It is deeply concerning to our department and to everyone in our portfolio agencies, the fact that anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, these types of issues are on the rise in Canada, very concerning. But that's why we put in place these types of measures in order to be able to support the communities that most need it. In addition, you did flag our Canada Centre. We do some really important prevention research, and we provide funding to key community leaders to be able to work on prevention of these types of actions in the first place and reducing that type of radicalization to violence that concerns our communities.
Thank you. Yeah, no, this funding has been, some of the religious places in my riding have taken advantage of that funding, and it really makes a difference. So thank you for that. My next question is for RCMP. In regards to Commissioner, in October of this year, federal RCMP investigation took down the largest and the most sophisticated drug lab in Canada. Can you please tell us about the raid and the work the RCMP continues to do to shut down illegal drug operations?
The RCMP works very closely with its law enforcement partners and other government departments. We do have a committee called CIROC, which is integrated combating organized crime. It's at the national level, and they are finalizing a strategy with tangible deliverables, all things fentanyl. The work that you're referring, the wonderful work from our folks in British Columbia resulted with a huge amount of fentanyl, as well as precursors that were seized, as well as a number of firearms that were seized. When you break it down, you're looking at 95 million doses that was stopped from going to the streets from British Columbia. And we've had good success over the 2024, where several places, PEI, Newfoundland, have good success when it came to fighting fentanyl.
When it comes to stopping criminals who would traffic in guns and drugs, there is an international element involved in it. So can you please update this committee on the partnerships the RCMP has with American law enforcement and how that partnership is keeping our communities safe from firearms and fentanyl?
Yeah, there are many committees that we are part of, as well as the CBSA as well. You look at the Cross-Border Crime Forum that involves several Canadian departments as well as American departments. You look at the Five Eyes on the international scene. There's sharing of information on many fronts there. You look at the North American Leaders Summit, the trilateral agreements that are there, the agreements that are signed by the President, the Prime Minister, as well as the President of Mexico. We have a precursor targeting intake program that we have here in Canada that we reach out to manufacturers, suppliers, and whatnot. And there's a lot of work going on with the DEA. There was actually last March, there was actually a symposium in Toronto to bring Canada as well as American colleagues together to discuss about fentanyl and learn from each other.
Time? Okay. So through Bill C-21, the government created new criminal code provisions targeting the printing of ghost guns. Can you please update this committee on how those new provisions are being used to combat the use of 3D printed ghost guns?
I probably invite Trish to chime in, but I would say that ghost guns are a huge concern to us and to our American colleagues. For those who are not familiar, it's a gun printed by the 3D printer, in which parts can be purchased online. The metal parts can be purchased online. They fabricate the 3D gun, plastic 3D gun without any serial number, which what we see from criminals, organized crime groups, the gun is used for once and then is disposed of. So that is challenging, and I welcome the new legislation to allow us, when we do a search in a residence, to seize the equipment that's now illegal.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Madame Michaud pour 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci tout le monde de votre présence ici. C'est toujours apprécié de vous recevoir.
Thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to have you here. It's a pleasure to have you here, particularly the Commissioner of the RCMP. You talked about Wrexham Road a while ago when you talked about the movement of employees. And reference have been made to a Radio Canada article that said that information was obtained from the RCMP in Léger, in Quebec, to make sure that each program will contribute 25% of its employees to the regular force to help work at the borders. And of course, all these follows threats that have been made by President-elect Trump to impose a 25% tariff on Canada. And also, Minister LeBlanc came out to say that border security was going to be reinforced. And this reminds me of the situation of Wrexham Road. A lot of money was deployed there. What does it mean when you take agents from one sector to send them to the border? For example, at a time when just a few months ago we're talking about firearms control, there was a lot of illegal importation of firearms. Where are all these RCMP officers? We thought that they were all at Wrexham Road to control irregular movements. We want to control the borders. That's a good thing. There are other solutions that could be used. But what does this mean for the RCMP officers who are being deployed from one place to another? Does this have other consequences on other fights that are being engaged? Thank you for the question. Of course, if we mobilize resources for other priorities, there are consequences. We are not different from other police forces, as Ms. Erin O'Gorman said. We assign resources according to priorities. For Quebec and Ontario, the mandate at entry points is controlled by the federal police, where the federal police is also present throughout the country. Let me come back to the question by Ms. Danchot, taking people from a detachment. The first wave will be to look at our federal resources, the first phase, before looking at contractual resources or frontline resources. The reality, as I said a while ago, is that there are priorities that are constantly evolving, so we must mobilize people in light of current priorities. Now, Ms. O'Gorman, one of the solutions that seem to be ideal is to allow border services to patrol outside border posts or between the border posts, as the RCMP may do. Yesterday, the president of the union sent a letter to Mr. LeBlanc saying our members are ready to do the job required. They have the expertise required. There are different laws that exist to control that. But this is an order that was adopted in 1932 that prevents them from doing that. So it takes some political will from the minister to drop that order and allow border officers to go patrol in those areas and to go provide support at the border post. Have you heard that request from the union and from the employees? Do you think that is a good solution to safeguard our borders? Just like my colleagues, I am open to any solution that contributes to security, that's for sure. And I agree with Mr. Weber that our employees, our agents are ready to do whatever they need to do for the safety of our country. They are motivated and they work very hard every day. So if it takes a change in the law, as I said, it's up to the government and parliament to take those decisions. I would like to see an analysis of what has been observed, what it means now to have a mandate to do that job, and what impact will it have at the entry points. I think an analysis is important. Every day at the entry points, our employees are working to execute their mandate. Thank you.
Ah, il me reste une minute. Désolée, je n'avais pas vu.
I have 1 minute left. I'm sorry, I didn't see that. We're hearing about security at the borders in the news recently. The government of Canada has just announced that they are working in line with the U.S. to adjust working hours at some entry points, and this has some impact in some areas in Quebec. Hours will be reduced from the 6th of January. I think we are sending out a contradictory message. We are talking about more agents at the borders, more money, but at the same time, we are hearing that service hours are going to be cut. When I put the question to the government, I was told that according to the figures, there were not many people going through some entry points, and that is why a decision was taken to reduce the service hours. We have figures, but they are not distributed. Well, I don't think you should have them with you right now, but could you send the figures indicating the number of people that go through the entry points, like child favor, for example, to know when people go across the borders? People talked about a few after 6 p.m. If you have those figures, please send them to the committee. Thank you. Yes. If I may say something. For us, it's not reduction, but simply aligning with American hours. Operationally speaking, it's very difficult to have one country, the U.S. or Canada, open while the other border is closed. So we always try to work in alignment with our partners at the borders. And they also try to work in alignment with us. We have about 30 entry points, and it's about 2 trucks per hour. And we could share the analysis with the committee. But it's really a matter of security to have a partner on the other side of the border and to move our employees to ports where there are higher risks because of the volume. Yes, we'll share that information with you.
For 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you to all of the officials who are joining with us at the committee today. I'd like to start with Mr. Rogers and the service. I've taken a look at the detailed breakdown of what you are asking in terms of these supplementary estimates, and I can see that the lion's share of the funding that you are requesting is to mitigate security risks and to enhance intelligence capabilities. What I would like to know is how much of this funding is related to the new legislative authorities that the Parliament of Canada granted to CSIS through Bill C-70. I just want to get a sense of how that legislation is being operationalized and maybe how these costs relate to that.
for the question. I'm happy to answer. You're right that the bulk of the funding is around increasing intelligence capacity and mitigating security risks. I will say that it's not directly tied to the new legislation, but it will certainly help our ability to implement the new legislation. An increase to our intelligence capacity means we will have better visibility into intelligence threats, which we can then share through resilience disclosures, which is something that C70 afforded us the ability to do. It also means that the new tools in C70 will also be implemented through this. So we have new production orders and new mechanisms to allow us to seek information, and some of this capacity will be directed towards things like the ability to use technology and digital tools to be able to assist in our intelligence, and those authorities do interrelate. So we will see an overall increase linked to C70, but not directly tied to C70.
Thank you for that. One other question I had, too, in the detailed breakdown of the money that you're asking for. It's not something I normally associate with CSIS, but there's a line item here of recovery of proceeds from parking fees collected, and you're asking for $1.7 million. I'd just like to know why $1.7 million is necessary for this.
Maybe I'll allow my CFO to respond, if that's all right.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So on our HQ campus, when our employees park or when visitors park, they pay to do so. When we collect that funding, we give it back to the Receiver General or the Consolidated Revenue Fund, and this is the mechanism of being transparent with Parliament of it coming back to us to pay for things like snow cleanup on the parking lot and maintenance of the parking lot and so on. So it is those parking fees. Okay,
I just wanted some clarity. It's not something you usually see with CSIS. Thank you for that. I'd like to next turn to Ms. Kelly in the Correctional Service of Canada. I met with the union who represents your correctional officers, and I'm sure you're very well aware of their concerns. I do see in the detailed breakdown of the asks you have in the supplementary estimates is $58 million for changes in offender population and price fluctuations, but also $29 million, 29.7 for operations related to workplace injuries. Ms. Kelly, I'd just like to know, through this funding that you're asking from us, how specifically are you addressing the union's very real concerns about workplace safety? Because, I actually last month tried out their virtual reality simulator, which puts you directly into the environment. And, workplace injuries are quite high in that line of work. So are the mental health demands. So I'd just like to know how this funding is being used to tackle what the union's very real concerns are.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So in terms of the funding, the $29.7 million, this is really increase in costs for workers' compensation benefits. So that's what it's for. But in terms of your question for, staff safety, I too put on the goggles and saw the obviously the environment in which they work, which is extremely challenging. So at our national labor management meetings, this is something that we discuss regularly, staff safety. So for our officers, we provide training, we provide them with equipment, we do threat risk assessment. One issue, though, that's been a real challenge for the service is drones. And drones have increased in the last few years by 271%, which is huge. And what happens is sometimes when they are successful in dropping items, the items that are seized are unfortunately drugs, but also sometimes weapons, which increases the violence in our institutions. So in terms of drones, we're investing a lot, and we have a layered approach.
Sorry, I just only have a minute left, and I just want to get one question into the Department of Public Safety to Ms. Geddes. I noticed, so the $800 million that you are asking for disaster financial assistance arrangements, that's on top of the $550 million, I believe, that was already allocated. So more than 100% of what's already been allocated is going to bring our total financial commitments to $1.3 billion. I mean, it's obvious the costs related to climate change are going up and up. I would just like to know, is the department doing any kind of forecasts? I mean, is this $800 million next year going to turn into $1 billion, $2 billion the year after that? I think taxpayers really need to have a clear picture of how the department is forecasting what future demands are going to be like.
Thank you very much for the question. Some of the complexity around our DFAA legislation is that we're reliant on the provinces and territories to submit their resourcing asks. Sometimes this can happen years after an event. So our ability to be able to, it's actually retrospective as opposed to prospective. So we're operating within an envelope, but our ability to be able to determine when the provinces and territories will be able to align their funding requirements to our ability to apportion it, we do our best to be keeping in constant contact with the provinces and territories in that regard. But it is a little difficult sometimes to predict because we are certainly in receive mode.
Okay. Great. Thank you. That concludes the first round. Naturally, the second round commences. Ms. Stancho, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the RCMP Commissioner, you mentioned to my colleague from the bloc about that to pull any RCMP resources to redeploy from the border, the primary wave would be from federal resourcing rather than the contract policing or the community policing, so to speak. So how many officers are you preparing to redeploy to the border from federal resources?
So right now, we don't have any intelligence to indicate where the surge is going to be, if there's going to be a surge, so we'll have to wait for any announcements. But the organization has to be nimble enough to identify where these hotspots are.
I'm so sorry, I was not clear. Regarding the threat from President-elect Trump about the 25% tariffs because of the more than 20,000 individuals who have crossed from Canada into the United States and the 12,000 kilograms of various illicit substances, that seems to be their focus and their threat of really an economic recession in Canada. So my questions are, what is the RCMP going to do to redeploy their efforts to the border? Because as we've outlined, the CBSA does not have jurisdiction between the ports of entry, and the issue is between the ports of entry in your jurisdiction. So are you saying that there's no commitment, there's no plan right now to redeploy those federal resources right now?
There's contingency plans being built as to what units are impacted if we need that surge capacity. And I even went as far as we could even look at, depending of the situation, redeploying people, cadets, out of training, just like we did on Parliament Hill in 2015 or 2014, temporarily, depending on the surge that we're facing. But throughout the country, Deputy Commissioner Mark Flynn, who's in charge of federal policing, is in lockstep with all the commanding officers. There's a contingency plan set for surge capacities.
Again, I'm not necessarily focused on of course, we are concerned very much about the surge that may come in from the United States, but for the purposes of what the Trump administration is threatening and the economic recession that they're threatening, they're saying right now this is happening. There was the people and the drugs coming from Canada to the U.S. is their concern. So my understanding that right now, with the status quo right now, which the Americans have the issue with, there's no plan if things remain how they are now to redeploy RCMP resources between the ports of entry.
The challenging part, Mr. Chair, with it is the offense is only committed when they cross the border, which is challenging. And again, it's going to go with the collaboration. There was an incident that happened just the 29th where 6 individuals crossed in Manitoba near Emerson. And USBP called us right away. We were able to locate the 6 individuals and whatnot. So there's collaboration, but I think, Mr. President, it will be really important to identify those hot areas based on the position that the U.S. will take.
I see. So what you're saying is you're not concerned about the individuals that are sort of approaching the border, and when they do cross border, that's the Border Patrol for the U.S.'s problem.
Well, if you go back to Roxham Road, it was the other way around. People were actually
Right.
lined up in the United States to come through Canada. So the offense actually happens once they cross the border, which is sadly enough. But again, it's more important than ever to have the right technology and the right partnerships south of the border, which the partnership with the USBP is very strong.
Thank you. To the CBSA, Ms. O'Gorman, then again, we're hearing concerns raised, as I mentioned, from Mr. Weber, the union president for our border agents, that the issue of the crossing, whether northward or southward, is between the ports of entry, and you are limited in your jurisdiction to do that. And the RCMP has outlined there's not any immediate plan to redeploy RCMP resources between the ports of entry to stop the influx into the U.S. from Canada, again, which is the primary concern of the incoming American administration. So what discussions have you had with the RCMP, if any, to expand your jurisdiction, expand the mandate of the CBSA to fill some of those gaps between ports of entry? Has there been any discussion? And again, I'll just point out that it's been 20 days since the new border czar, Tom Homan, flagged this as a major issue that he's going to have with Canada, that indicated this was going to be a problem. And of course, over a week ago, President Trump announced these very frightening tariffs and what that's going to do to our economy. So I'm just not getting a sense that there's any immediate action to deploy any new resources from the RCMP or the CBSA between the ports of entry, which is the issue with the Americans right now. I'm just concerned about that. Can you comment?
So a few things. We work with the RCMP every day in executing our respective mandates. At my level, all the way down to the front line, our officers know each other, they talk to each other. Irregular migration has been steadily decreasing, not to say it's not happening, and certainly CBSA processes people who come and seek asylum through the air mode and the land mode every day. And I say that just to say we are implementing the STCA every day, which is to say people come from the U.S. and seek asylum into Canada, and we determine whether they meet an exception to the STCA, and if they don't, we return them, and the U.S. does the same thing. So I think it's important to note at the ports of entry, we are applying the STCA, and it's working. In terms of between the ports, certainly we share targeting information, share intelligence, and we work in integrated teams, the integrated border enforcement teams, which includes the U.S., and there's a BEST, and I will fail that acronym, I think it's Border Enforcement Task Forces, are also, again, on the U.S. side with embedded RCMP and CBSA. So, you know, whether we're stepping out to do patrols that we don't have the authority to do, but I'm satisfied that from an intelligence and information sharing perspective, we're doing it every day, all the time across the country.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Ms. Dancho. Ms. Damo for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you to all the officials for being here. I just want to make a comment before I start. When I first started on Public Safety Committee back in 2016, myself and my assistant Ellen were the only 2 women in the room, and every member and every official and everyone sitting out there were men. And it's quite something to see, you know, elected officials and representatives of the department being far more diverse than it was when I first sat on this committee. So sorry, it was just an observation that I noticed when we all sat down. My first question is for you, Commissioner. I saw on social media a letter or a post from a Conservative candidate talking about cuts to the RCMP, and it was in response to an email that I guess you had sent to members. And I just wonder, can you confirm that regular uniformed members of the RCMP have been excluded from the Responsible Government Spending Initiative?
So, Mr. Chair, the purpose of that email is it was well known within the government that there'd be cuts in several departments, and people within the organization were questioning how we would be affected. So it was more an awareness for them that we're working closely with Sam and the Senior Executive Committee to look at areas that could be impacted. Now, that being said, there's still ongoing conversation with the Minister with regards to what those cuts may look like, if any. So.
Is it going to impact, though, the members themselves? Are you going to be laying off any RCMP members? Everything we've heard so far today is the opposite.
No, initially, the conversation initially is that the frontline members, so the uniformed members, the police officers, the sworn-in officers, would not be affected. But then you create this imbalance because you have a critical infrastructure that's supporting everything we do on the front line. We have scientists in the labs, we have analysts, so it's just to say we're going to cut in this area. It's going to be an imbalance. And the right support for the people on the front line may not just be there. So there's ongoing conversation with the Minister on that.
Okay, thank you. My next question is for Director Rogers. We've had a number of conversations at this committee about foreign interference, as you know. In fact, you appeared at the committee on that. And as we know, the Leader of the Opposition has refused to get a top secret security clearance. My question is just if you could let us know in this committee the difference between a threat reduction measure and a top secret security clearance.
Thank you for the question. I can try and answer that. I think, the most fundamental way of receiving top secret information is to obtain a clearance and to receive it. And having a clearance, whether it's top secret, secret, or otherwise, would give someone access to that information if they have a need to know it. And that's the general way that classified information is shared within and outside the government. The threat reduction measures available to the service allow us to apply a legal test and a legal framework that allow us, in certain instances, to disclose information to someone who does not have a security clearance in order to reduce a threat. That doesn't require the person we're disclosing the information to have a security clearance, but it does constrain us within that framework with the information that we're able to share, because it has a certain legal test to be able to meet the threshold to be able to reduce a threat. So it is a fairly unique way of sharing information. It's not the only way, but that's the main difference.
But just to be clear, you're not able to share as much information. For example, all of the other party leaders have obtained that top secret security clearance. So you are limited by the information that you can share. Is that correct?
Yes, with the threat reduction measure, there's a constrained process, and we have to meet certain tests to be able to share information specifically related to the threat we are trying to mitigate against.
And then with the minute I have left, Ms. Geddes, thank you for being here. I wonder if you could update us on what the department has been doing to implement Bill C-21. We heard about ghost guns. I can't tell you how proud I was to see police making an arrest using provisions of the bill that we had in there. But I just wondered if you could update us on some of the other things that you've been working on.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. There are a number of regulatory amendments brought forward by C-21. Some of those have to do with gender-based violence. They're the ones that I personally feel very strongly about. We're doing some significant work to be able to accelerate and advance all the regulatory amendments included within C-21. I think we've made progress already. I think there's more to be done, and this is one of our top initiatives right now, is to be able to see through all the regulatory changes brought about by C-21.
I met recently with a group from New Zealand, and they said that our red flag, yellow flag provisions were the best in the world, and that our ghost guns were far ahead of every other country in the world. So kudos to you folks, but also to us for getting that bill passed.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Damoff. Madame Michaud pour Dominique Dami.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. I will continue with C-21 with Ms. Geddes. It's great to hear that the measures we adopted are amongst the best in the world, but they need to be enforced. Unfortunately, they are not yet enforced. We're still waiting for adoption of C-21, and the government has promised a buyback program for guns this fall. That has not been done, and this Friday we will be celebrating the 35th anniversary of the Polytechnic tragedy. The group of women who are survivors and families of victims have been asking for many years that the government should ban military-style weapons. A decree was adopted a few years ago, adopted some models, but there are still some available on the market. And you know that under C-21, the definition of these types of weapons are evergreen, so only concern weapons that were designed after the date of adoption of the bill. So there are still hundreds of models that are still available on the market. There's the group Police Se Souvient and others that have talked about this. What about, could an owner of a prohibited weapon sell it to the government, get the money, and buy a similar model that is still available on the market? Police Se Souvient says that it's all good to come up with a buyback program, but it's useless if people can use the money to go buy similar models that are still available. Do you think that the government is serious with this buyback model? But we need to totally ban military-style weapons to prevent wasting taxpayers' funds with the buyback funds that could be used by the owners. We need an efficient method. We proposed a task force that could look into the weapons in circulation which would be eligible for the buyback program, it may be too late for this committee. I think the RCMP has the expertise to determine the types of weapons that should be eligible. Some of you came and testified. It looks like indigenous communities use some of them for their hunting purposes. Has progress been made? When the government will come back with this buyback program, are we going to totally ban military-style weapons?
Mr. Chair, a series of pieces in that question, so I'm just going to try to address all of them quite quickly. I know we have limited time. So just to be clear, further to the last question, obviously very important work that we still need to do to be able to see 3C21 through and all the regulatory amendments, including, as we mentioned, some significant gender-based violence regulations that I think are quite critical. The second part is around the firearms compensation program. And as we have mentioned previously here, and I know the Minister has mentioned, there are 2 phases planned for that firearms compensation program. The first phase, which we expect to begin quite soon, would involve purchasing all the firearms that are currently banned from businesses. So that is happening in the near term. The final part of the question related to other models of firearms that need to be assessed. I can assure you that the public safety employees working very closely with the RCMP Firearm Center are in the process of reviewing all other models just to ensure that we can work quite quickly to be able to identify assault-style firearms within the other models. We will continue to consult other experts as we are able to do so.
Great. Thank you, Mr. McGregor, for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'll turn my questions to the RCMP, and because I only have 2.5 minutes, maybe I'll load up 2 questions for you. I met with the NPF, I think it was in October, and one of the items that they identified with me was they would like to see federal policing program services bolstered. And I think that's a fair ask because we're very aware around this committee of certainly the dangers that are being posed by organized crime, whether it's in car thefts, drug trafficking, human trafficking, you name it. That's a very real threat. And so I think my first question would be, Commissioner, just on how you are working with the union to address that particular ask. And the other question is regarding the Super Lab bust in Falkland, BC. Like in a previous life, I used to be a tree planter. I know Falkland, BC really well. And to have a laboratory of that magnitude in that small rural community is quite a shock. From my own research, I know now that organized crime is really looking into the precursors to the precursors. And soon you're going to have a chemist who is skilled enough to just go to everyday items. So can you talk a little bit about the challenge the RCMP is facing? I know you have you're continually adding a list of precursors that are used to manufacture drugs like methamphetamine and fentanyl, but how are you addressing the challenge when you get skilled chemists who are going to go back far enough along the chain to get items that are available to everyday people?
So, Mr. Chair, on the first part of your question, with regards to federal policing, there's been work for the last couple of years now looking at how we can increase the capacity of federal policing by looking at different ways of training our members when they come in. Right now, our academy at Depot in Saskatchewan, Regina, is used for every police officer that comes in, regardless of the function you're going to do. I think we do a real good job to prepare our police officers to go to the front line. But it doesn't do much for the federal policing environment. And what we're looking at is a different stream, a different career stream within the organization where people would have a choice to do contract work or federal policing work with the appropriate training for federal policing. On your second question, it's well known that chemists are involved, be it meth or fentanyl. It is a challenge. They usually go in small areas and whatnot. But it's the good work that's being done by sharing intelligence, either with CBSA, USBP, DEA, sharing the intelligence and working together to address them. You look at the success we've had with the FBI with Project Snowboarder. The ex-Canadian Olympic, who's still on the loose right now, but this is a huge file in which we contributed, and it touched on import of fentanyl coming up through the states to the country. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. That concludes the first hour. Now I'd like to suspend maybe for 30 seconds, give the minister a chance to sit down. I call the meeting back to order. I'd like to welcome the Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions, and Intergovernmental Affairs, the Honorable Dominic LeBlanc. I now invite the Minister to make an opening statement of up to 5 minutes.
So, Mr. Chair, thank you. Colleagues, thank you for joining us. I hope you were kind and gentle to the senior officials who were here before me. I hope that that same spirit of kindness continues for the next hour. Mr. Chair, let me begin by congratulating you on assuming the chair of this important committee. I wish you a successful stewardship of this committee. Teasing aside, I want to thank my colleagues, the officials. It's quite a collection of horsepower from the public safety portfolio you have. I'm glad they were able to be here at 11 o'clock. As you know, Mr. Chair, I was in a cabinet meeting that's still ongoing. And I will sadly excuse myself at 1 o'clock sharp because, as you know, the leaders of the opposition are meeting with the Prime Minister to talk about borders and border security and our meeting with President Trump on Friday. And I was asked to provide an update. So if you see me excuse myself, it will be for that reason. It's also a moment. I said to Dan Rogers and Joanne Blanchard, Joanne assumed the chair of the National Parole Board and Dan is the director of CSIS. It's my first time with them before this committee, and I think that they'll serve Canadians in an outstanding way, and I'm happy to be here with them as well. Monsieur le Président, en mars dernier, quand j'ai témoigné devant ce...
Mr. Chair, last March, when I testified before this committee to discuss my mandate, we talked about the work the government is doing to stop criminals trying to smuggle drugs and weapons into our country, as well as efforts to combat auto theft. We discussed foreign interference and the need to introduce and pass legislation to give the Canadian Security Intelligence Service modern tools to protect Canada. Since then, Canadian law enforcement agencies have done a lot of excellent work. Over the past 2 years, the Canada Border Services Agency has intercepted more than 13 tons of illegal drugs at land crossings across the country. And in 2023, CBSA seized over 900 prohibited firearms and more than 27,000 weapons. In June 2024, law enforcement agencies across the country took part in a nationwide operation to crack down on the manufacture and trafficking of ghost guns. Around 440 firearms, both traditional and 3D printed, and 52 3D printers were seized.
October of this year, federal RCMP forces in British Columbia took down the largest, most sophisticated drug lab in Canada. This is the excellent work that the RCMP with their partners do in every corner of our country every day. The combined fentanyl and precursors seized at this facility alone would have amounted to 95 million potentially lethal doses of fentanyl entering our communities or being exported abroad. On the auto theft front, something that this committee has leaned into, the Border Services Agency has intercepted more than 2,000 stolen vehicles in rail yards and ports to date this year alone, already exceeding last year's work, but we recognize there is obviously more good work to be done. Early trends for 2024 show a 17% reduction in auto theft, but we still recognize that these figures remain stubbornly high. Additionally, in October of this year, the RCMP took the unprecedented step of releasing findings with respect to the involvement of agents of the government of India in serious criminal activity on Canadian soil. Due to that announcement and subsequent actions taken by the government and law enforcement agencies, there has been, to quote the commissioner of the RCMP, kind of awkward to quote him when he's sitting at the table, but this will flatter him. To quote the commissioner of the RCMP, there has been a significant reduction to the public safety threat posed. Additionally, in the supplementary estimates before you, Mr. Chair, our government is investing $16 million to support the RCMP's foreign interference-related criminal investigations. Those same estimates show that CSIS's budget is increasing by more than $53 million this year. While detailed breakdowns of CSIS expenditures are understandably classified, I can say that the tools available to CSIS have been strengthened and modernized with the passage of Bill C-70, and I thank colleagues on this committee for the good work that we did together in that regard. This crucial funding will ensure CSIS can continue to keep Canadians safe from threats such as violent extremism and foreign interference. CSIS's budget will have increased 48% compared to 10 years ago. And under our government's stewardship, the RCMP will be receiving 101% more funding to do the important work they do for Canadians in this same period. These investments and the results that are being achieved, I think, should attest to everyone the collective concern all of us have around public safety. Last year, the government proposed a $637 million increase in the budgets of our public safety department and portfolio agencies. This year, it's over $2 billion. Investments found in these supplementary estimates will combat auto theft, advance the work that the government and partner agencies are doing to combat foreign interference, provide those experiencing violent hate, increased police presence and investigative work, and continue to keep communities safe across the country. Monsieur le Président, notre gouvernement.
Mr. Chair, our government will continue to make responsible investments to keep our country safe. I hope we can count on the support of all parliamentarians and members of this committee to quickly pass the supplementary estimates that are before you. And on that note, Mr. Chair,
that I'm very excited about the opportunity to answer questions from colleagues. It's something I look forward to. I was counting the days till I'd have this opportunity, sort of like how many shopping days left before Christmas. So you can't imagine, Mr. Chair, how happy I am to be here with you this morning.
Great. Thank you, Minister. It's great to have you here. I now open the floor up to questions. Ms. Dancho for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Minister, for being here. There are 48 days until President Trump is inaugurated on January 20th. So in the next 6 weeks, how many more additional RCMP officers will be redeployed to the border to patrol between ports of entry by January 20th, sir?
Ms. Dancho, thank you for the question. The government has been working with the RCMP and CBSA in particular on how we can increase both the redeployment of officers and acquire new technology and equipment. We will have announcements to make in the coming weeks, recognizing that January 20th is obviously an important moment. I've seen the Commissioner's comments publicly, and he's talked to me about the ongoing redeployment the RCMP and CBSA make dependent on threat assessment. But that, I can assure you, that work is ongoing, and the details will be some of it's operational police planning. I would leave to the Commissioner,
Minister.
but happy to talk publicly about it.
May I just ask again, the numbers, how many additional, what is the redeployment numbers for the border? Because you've made it quite clear, sir, that between ports of entry is RCMP jurisdiction. How many will be redeployed?
But again, Ms. Dancho, a very good question. We haven't made, as a government, I think, those final decisions. We're working based on the advice from the CBSA and the RCMP, of course. And I look to the Commissioner or the President if they're in a position to say precisely how many officers at what particular sector or what border crossing. Some of this might, in fact, be operational information.
That actually, we just spoke about it. It doesn't seem that there's been any conversations thus far about redeploying specific resources to the border between ports of entry right now, only if there's perhaps a surge from the United States into Canada. But of course, we know the Americans have an issue with what's coming from Canada into the United States. So thus far, there is no number available or really a plan, from what we understand, to redeploy RCMP resources. There's also not a plan to increase border agents either. So is there a number in your mind of what the plan is to increase border agents' boots on the ground by the 20th? What is the number that you're looking to increase it?
Again, I've said publicly, and we reassured our American friends at the dinner Friday evening in Palm Beach, that we will be increasing those numbers. I have received some advice from the Border Services Agency and the RCMP. I'm working with the Minister of Finance, and will be happy to announce the details in as much as is possible when they're finalized.
Thank you, Minister. But again, you've been talking about a plan, but there doesn't seem to be any concrete meetings that are happening to increase or to redeploy right now between the borders. I think that is an area of concern because you've said yourself you're not interested in expanding. It's not a priority to expand the CBSA mandate. And I'm sure you saw the communications from the union president there that it's so frustrating as a border agent to see these individuals crossing and that's not in their jurisdiction. So will you be expanding the CBSA mandate to beyond the port, to in between the port of entry, given these dynamics?
So again, Ms. Dancho, you've asked two questions. The first one is there haven't been any meetings to discuss redeployment. I had an opportunity yesterday with the president of CBSA and the commissioner of the RCMP and our deputy minister to discuss potential options in this regard. So those meetings have been ongoing as recently as this time yesterday. Don't want to correct you. You said I have said that we're not interested in expanding the CBSA mandate. I'm not sure that's entirely accurate. What I have said is we're interested in taking immediate steps that will reassure Canadians and the Americans that the border remains secure and the integrity of the border is protected. But we're always interested. We've taken notes of the union president's comments. The commissioner and I have talked about this issue in the past.
Yes,
we haven't made any decisions in that regard, but are open to considering that as well.
Thank you. But what is the immediate step on the redeployment numbers? You can't tell me the numbers of how many you're going to redeploy. The commissioner also is not aware of any plan in that regard, and the CBSA president also has not heard any asks from you to increase the boots on the ground. So it doesn't seem that there is immediate action forthcoming on this. And again, it's 48 days away, and we're facing down the barrel of a 25% tariff and economic recession, and there isn't a concrete plan here that I'm hearing from you about actual boots on the ground to address the concerns of the Americans. Again, so there's no number right now for the redeployment between ports of entry, rather from RCMP or from the CBSA.
So again, Ms. Dancho, I wouldn't imagine you'd want to put words in the mouth of the commissioner or the president of CBSA. I had asked them probably a month and a half or 2 months ago, and a number of times since, obviously, the election of President Trump. As you noted, the initial concern was about a potential south to north flow of people arriving at the border. That was the conversation that captivated Canadians a few weeks ago. You've seen, in light of the president's comments a week ago, that's changed as well, issues around fentanyl. I have received advice from the commissioner of the RCMP and the president of CBSA in terms of additional resources, including human resources, including personnel that we could recruit, hire, and redeploy, as well as equipment. And as I said, I'm working with the Minister of Finance, and we'll be happy to tell Canadians about this important work when it's finalized.
But it is a concern we've heard about for 20 days now from the borders for President Trump that this is going to be a problem. But there's no commitment that you're making today or in the past week, and certainly since your trip to Mar-a-Lago, to have additional resources.
I've just made that commitment.
How many, though?
But again, I told you, we're repeating ourselves. It's a circular argument. I've said that when we have finalized, there will be additional resources, human and equipment. We've said that consistently.
By January 20th?
And we will be making announcements in terms of procurement and personnel before that date. We are finalizing that as a government now, based on the advice that we received, the good advice from the RCMP and from the Border Services Agency. I understand it's exciting, and Canadians want to understand this. The good news is it's coming.
Thank you, Ms. Dancho.
Thank you.
Your time is up. Thank you, Minister. Ms. O'Connell, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister and officials, for being here. Based on that last series of questions, it would suggest that our borders, there have been zero investments made, there is zero protections done, and that we are only looking at securing our borders in 48 days. I find that to be ridiculous, especially given the fact, even in the supplemental estimates that we're looking at here, that would have been worked on previous to any American election, that there are, in fact, investments going into our border. And, Minister, my question to you is twofold. One, the commissioner in our previous panel mentioned surge capacity and that there isn't the intelligence yet to suggest that that surge is needed. However, in the event that that changes, that they are ready. So that's part of addressing this. But number two, we also have border security measures that we want to work with the Americans on, in particular when it comes to guns entering the border. And when it's dealing with President-elect Trump's concerns around securing borders, that it is the southern border, that there were over 2.1 million entries there. What are we doing not only to secure our borders on both sides, but to also speak to the fact that we can increase resources, but the fact is that we have consistently been in making these sorts of investments because we've always been committed to ensuring that our partnership with the U.S. is important, and that goes both ways in terms of imports of things like illegal drugs and guns.
So through you, Mr. Chair, Ms. O'Connell, thank you for the question. I share your view that the security, the continued security and integrity of the border is something that has, I think, occupied our government over the last 10 years. You noted, for example, investments that have been made consistently over a number of years. For example, 10 years ago, the budget for CSIS was $550 million. With these estimates, it'll be over $764 million. The Border Services Agency budget was $2 billion in 2014. It will now be $2.8 billion. The RCMP budget was over $2.8 billion in 2014, and with these estimates, it'll be over $5.7 billion. So we have continued to make investments, but we recognize, as we've said publicly, that there's always more work that we can do. I have become a very, very considerable fan of the excellent work that all of the agencies represented at the table do to protect Canadians and keep them safe. I've seen firsthand the RCMP and CBSA in terms of border security. I've seen briefings from our friends at CSIS that allow the RCMP and CBSA to be prepared, as you noted, for intelligence-driven information that allows them to make operational decisions in their judgment. And finally, Ms. O'Connell, I think your question was a good one. This was the conversation at Mar-a-Lago on Friday evening. It is a shared concern. We told President Trump and his future cabinet secretaries that the fight against fentanyl was one that Canada absolutely understood because we have the same objective as they do to dismantle the criminal gangs, the Mexican cartels, to stop the arrival of precursor chemicals, largely but not exclusively from China. That's work that's done every day by the men and women represented at this table with me and the people that work for them. It's very important work that we should be proud of because a great deal of it is done with American partners. And I think the conversation with the Americans on Friday evening was revealing in the sense we all took stock of integrated border enforcement teams, for example, that operate, and the Commissioner will correct me if I have the geography wrong, the province of Quebec has an integrated border enforcement team. Partners from the Sûreté de Québec, for example, participate in this work. This model repeats itself in other parts of the country. The CBSA is a partner. So this is an ongoing and active effort that so many people lean in on, but recognizing, as Ms. Dancho said, the threat of potentially devastating tariff applications to Canadians and the Canadian economy means that we need to show Canadians and, by consequence, our American friends that this work is ongoing, and we're prepared to step up in a visible way as well.
Perfect. Thank you. And on that, there has been a lot of discussion around staffing levels at CBSA. We know that under the Harper government, there was nearly 1,000 CBSA employees cut. We reinstated that funding and actually increased it, but it has been raised that there have been questions around whether or not those staffing levels are there. Can you or officials, I didn't have an opportunity in the first round to ask this question, but can you confirm our staffing investments at CBSA? Have they gone down or have they gone up?
So again, Ms. O'Connell, your question is a good one. Our government, as I indicated, if you just look over a 9-year period, the budget of CBSA has increased by over $800 million. I have ongoing and active conversations with Ms. O'Gorman, the President, in terms of what their needs are. I have received the Christmas list from the CBSA and the RCMP of additional resources that they think, in their judgment, would support this work. But if the President has precise details on the staffing levels, I would invite her, if there's time, to offer those views.
Full-time equivalent.
No.
CBSA has 16,300 what we call full-time people.
FTEs is the bureaucratic term.
8,500 of whom are frontline employees. And then if you were asking for 2014, that number would be 13,700.
So significantly
Great, thank
more.
you. Thank you, Mr. Connell. Madame Michaud, pour 6 minutes.
Inaudible for the interpreter. I had the opportunity to question you following the election of President Trump. Following the election, at the committee meeting, I was concerned by some of the statements made by Mr. Trump concerning the deportation of millions of migrants who might try to come to Canada. And I asked about the safety or security at the borders. And at the time, you said everything was okay, you had a plan, there was no need to do anything. If there was a crisis, you would manage it at the time. That was your answer. And then last week, you said, with all that Mr. Trump is announcing, there's the threat of a 25% tariff. We need to invest more at the border. We need more human resources, more air resources, more drones, helicopters, and so on. And it showed that you were not that ready. That's what I understand. I understand why you want to increase staff levels at the border, because Radio Canada recently said that there may be 6 employees per shift to cover about 600 kilometers of our U.S.-Canada border. So that's all good. We understand that the RCMP has the mandate to cover the border crossings. But conversely, as I asked the Commissioner a while ago, the decision to redeploy employees, to send more RCMP agents to the border, this definitely has an impact on other departments and on other battles that have to do with public safety. And the president of the union, Mark Webber, said his members have the expertise to patrol between border posts, and they would like to do so. But considering the Immigration Act, the Customs Act, and the Refugee Protection Act, there's nothing that prevents border service agents to do so, but rather it's an order that prevents them from doing so, an order that dates back to 1932. And that is what Mr. Mark Webber said in a letter that was sent to you yesterday. And according to your statements earlier, it doesn't seem to be a priority for you to broaden the mandate of CBSA to allow them to support the RCMP. Why? In this situation where we would think that the security level at the border is a priority, why not allow the RCMP employees who have the necessary expertise to go patrol at the borders? Ms. Michaud, thank you for the 25 questions that you've just asked. You said that when we met following the elections, I remember that I was confident that where there was increased migration from the south to the north, we will be ready. The RCMP, the CBSA will be ready. That remains my opinion. It hasn't changed. But you are right. The comments made by Mr. Trump 1 week ago, particularly at that time, the challenge was a fight against fentanyl and the concern of the USA, and that's something we discussed in Mar-a-Lago Tuesday evening. Their concern is people trying to go from the north to the south to enter the United States going through Canada. We needed to reassure them and reassure Canadians that we are able to reduce those figures, and we are leaders when it comes to fighting fentanyl. I think that situation has not changed. At the end, you came up with another very interesting question, the mandate of the border service agents compared to the RCMP. I totally agree with you. One of the challenges is that if Commissioner Johan and his commander in Quebec, for example, are facing an emergency or an operational situation that requires a redeployment of police officers, of course, they have to be removed from other investigations. That situation is not ideal, but that is what we've done for decades to manage a threat. That is why we will be increasing, well, the commissioner has already made a lot of progress. We'll be increasing the number of recruits at Regina. The trend is favorable, but it's not going to be done overnight. So I find the idea interesting that we look at the mandate of CBSA. I have had informal discussions with the president and the commissioner, and that was a few months ago, long before the American elections. Is it what we desire? Well, I visited Rigaud, the college for CBSA agents, and training is going on very well. It's not overnight that we can recruit hundreds of border agents. I understand that we don't have enough agents at the CBSA. That's not what I said. Is that what explains a reduction in service hours at the border post because you want to redeploy agents to more busy entry points? Is that the problem because there's a lack of resources at the CBSA? Is that why you are turning to the RCMP to safeguard our borders? The RCMP is already doing great work to safeguard our borders in partnership with the CBSA. They work together. I don't agree with you that we don't have enough CBSA agents. I was an opposition MP before. I understand how you are asking your questions. It's something you do very well. However, you are right. Now, talking about harmonization of hours at some entry points, I understand that the president responded while I was the Council of Ministers. I think he responded to you at the House. The objective was to be in alignment with our American partners, the border controls there. These discussions have been underway for months and years. We think that this would enhance security because if Americans unilaterally close their side of the border during some hours, if somebody crosses over, according to the Safe Third Country Agreement, they could arrest someone and have that person returned to the U.S. But if there's no one on the other side, they will be taken to a police post in Quebec, in a small village. Well, that cannot be done. So that was one way of improving security. But these discussions have been underway with the CBSA, with their American partners, and they have reassured me that this represents a reduction in some hours in some areas at the border.
For 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome to the committee, Minister. It's good to see you back here. It's been 9 years since those devastating conservative cuts to the CBSA, which made our border less safe. And so to hear them at committee today asking for more resources when they significantly contributed to the deficit that the CBSA is operating by is really quite incredible. But I'm not going to let you off the hook either, because Ms. O'Connell asked you a question and you painted a pretty rosy picture. I'm going to read you a quote from Mark Webber from October 17th. He appeared at a press conference with NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. I'm going to read it out to you. Quote, "I'll be honest, the reality at CBSA is bleak. Staffing-wise, past conservative cuts have left ports of entry severely understaffed. We would need almost 3,000 additional officers from coast to coast to coast to meet operational requirements. Current training facilities can only train up to 600 officers a year, which does not even cover attrition." So 9 years ago, we had devastating conservative cuts. You've just tried to paint a rosy picture. Mark Webber's quote seems to be quite opposite to what you just told this committee. Can you explain the difference?
Sure. Mr. McGregor, thank you for the question. I particularly liked the first part of your question. I thought that was excellent.
I'm sure you did.
I would have, maybe I didn't paint a rosy picture, maybe a less somber picture, because we have, as I noted, increased the resources for the CBSA, but I recognize, Mr. McGregor, that we need to do more, and that the responsibility they have is enormous. The kind of threats that we see at the border, human trafficking, gun smuggling, drugs, the criminal intelligence work that they do, the 200 criminal investigators that work at CBSA. These people are doing extraordinary work, but I totally share the view you expressed, Mr. McGregor, and that the union president has said publicly that we can continue to increase the human resource posture. So that's exactly what I will be, I hope, talking about publicly in the next few weeks, recognizing that we can continue to do more. I think we have been supportive. I hope we've been supportive of the good work, but we haven't finished, and we look forward to, I hope, your support on exactly that, as we will do more.
Thank you, Minister. I want to zero in on your recent meeting with the president at Mar-a-Lago. I think a lot of what's been happening in Canada has been reactive to the president's comments. You know, what are we going to do? However, you need to remember that as a Minister of Public Safety, your first and foremost priority is for Canadians on this side of the border. And of course, we have very real concerns on our side of the border with what is flowing into our country. There's a consequence in Canada to living beside the world's largest small arms manufacturer in the world. I'm wondering, Minister, how did you use that opportunity to present Canada's concerns, particularly with the flow of illegal firearms that are finding their way in many of Canada's major cities?
Mr. McGregor, thank you for that question. And that is exactly, and almost in those words, something we addressed with President Trump and his future cabinet secretaries on Friday evening at Mar-a-Lago. The Prime Minister did say, when he was talking about their concerns around, for example, fentanyl and precursor chemicals and drugs, that we have for a long time worried about illegal firearms smuggled into Canada. And the RCMP and CBSA have talked to me about that. We need to work with American partners. We made that point to him, that that was something that we wanted to do in partnership with them. The FBI, their U.S. Customs and Border Patrol have a role to play. I think the CBSA, as I noted, has done some good work in that area. But again, we need to continue to lean in on that, because that particular issue is having devastating consequences for law enforcement officers and citizens in cities, big and small, across the country. So the conversation was very much, this is a bilateral and binational challenge. We talked about cocaine and methamphetamine that comes into Canada from the United States. So I think we wanted to impress upon the Americans that not only did we share their concerns, we had our own as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I want to now change the channel to the adoption of Bill C-20. It received royal assent on October the 31st. It's calling, in that legislation, it's authorizing the establishment of a Public Complaints and Review Commission. As you know, Minister, many Black, racialized, and Indigenous Canadians, they have had negative interactions with our police services. There have been negative interactions at the border. The call for such a commission, it's been a long time coming, let's just say. So there's been a lot of interest in the establishment of this commission, and I think it will give a lot of certainty when it starts being operationalized. My question to you, though, is the coming into force is reliant on Governor and Council. I'd like you to inform this committee, Minister, what steps have you taken as Minister to operationalize the establishment? I'd just like to be clear on what the timelines are, what future budget projections are, just when Canadians can expect this to be operationalized.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. McGregor, thank you for a very good question. I was very happy when that legislation was adopted. You're right, it was a long time in the making. I was also encouraged by the support of the RCMP and CBSA for that legislation to be adopted and to operationalize it quickly. So I sensed zero hesitancy from the leadership of CBSA or the RCMP in recognizing that that was an important improvement for the reasons you said in terms of building public confidence, in the good work that these agencies do and reassuring the groups of people that you...
Governor and Council
do the
job.
I have seen potential appointments. We do need to appoint people sensitive to the diversity that you identified or the objective of providing that reassurance. So the appointments we make, I hope, will be in some part an answer to that. I hope to go to Cabinet soon with those names, and I expect very quickly to bring that into effect. We're not delaying, or there's no reason to delay other than finalizing the names and taking them before Cabinet. But if the deputy has more technical answers, perhaps she could provide them?
Just very quickly.
Nothing really. We are working on those very quickly. We understand the urgency here. It has been a long time coming. We're really keen to get these moved forward. And as you pointed out, the operational agencies are equally excited to see this work done.
Parliament did its job. We're waiting for you guys. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. That concludes the first round. We'll move on to the second round with Ms. Tancher for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, the priority, it seems, in addressing the 25% tariff threat from President-elect Trump is addressing what's happening in between the ports of entry right now. You're nodding, so I see you would agree? You nodded when I said that.
Of course that's a priority, but it's also a priority at the ports of entry. I see these as equal priorities. We take the operational advice of the RCMP and CSIS in terms of where the particular threat is.
Thank you. It is a priority, though, between the ports of entry, and we're not getting clear commitments from you for the redeployment of RCMP resources or increased boots on the ground. In fact, to Ms. Michaud, when she said that we don't have enough CBSA agents, you said that you didn't agree with her in that regard. So is your opinion that we do, in fact, have enough CBSA agents? So from that, I can defer that there won't be an increase in CBSA agent boots on the ground. And certainly, as you know, our leader, Pierre Poilievre, is committed to working with provincial law enforcement as well to redeputize some of those individuals to secure the in between the ports of entry at the border and to expand the CBSA mandate to work between the ports as well. So again, we are committed to increasing those boots on the ground, but I'm not hearing that commitment from you, in particular in your response to Ms. Michaud. So there is no commitment to increase boots on the ground at this time. It's certainly not before January 20th. From what you've said.
Yeah, again, just because you repeat it 4 or 5 times, Ms. Dancho, doesn't make it true. I also said to Madame Michaud that we were absolutely committed to increasing the personnel of the CBSA and the RCMP. We have made considerable steps in that regard to reverse the cuts that your previous Conservative government had made, but we also recognize we can do more, and we'll do more as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Minister. I'm glad that you brought the cuts up because I was reviewing all the annual reports back to the Martin years, if you'd believe it. And it would seem that just based on the annual report data itself, that in fact during the Harper years of 10 years, there was an increase of 1,700 positions at the CBSA during his 10-year mandate and $500 million of increased investments to the CBSA at that point. And in fact, based on the annual report data, in the last year, we ensured that there were 336 additional frontline workers. We were looking at that same time, as you know, to balance the books. Harper eliminated the deficit at that time, and we had a 26% decrease in violent crime, contrasting that with your government's record, Minister, of course, a 50% increase in violent crime and the largest debt accumulation in history. Actually, all governments combined before you don't match the debt that your government has accrued. So it is interesting. And in fact, in the first 2 years of the mandate of your government at CBSA, you cut 237 frontline border boots on the ground positions and another 450 in 2020 to 2021. And in fact, you reduced in 2017 the jobs at CBSA back to 2008 levels. So it is interesting that given the balancing of the budget, reducing of crime under Harper government, we're seeing just quite the opposite from yours. And I'll certainly defend the Harper record 7 days a week in that regard. And I do appreciate that you feel confident that you're bringing forward a plan. We haven't heard any commitment on the numbers. And of course, you weren't invited to Mar-a-Lago because you were doing a good job on the border. In fact, quite the opposite, correct? So we are having serious issues at the border, and we're not getting a sense from you that you're ensuring redeployment of RCMP immediately to secure the border, or that you're increasing agents on the ground at CBSA or working with CBSA to expand their mandate. So again, not clear what your plan is. You've talked about technology, fair enough, we agree in that regard, but you've provided no concrete commitments. And so really for the Americans, they're not seeing anything coming before January 20th to this point. And I find that concerning given we're staring down the barrel of a 25% tariff economic recession by January 20th. So again, I may be obsessed with talking about numbers and boots on the ground, but you have made no commitment on that, and that is the issue that the Americans are threatening us with. So I'll just ask you again, boots on the ground, increase from RCMP to CBSA in between ports of entry, yes or no?
Dancho, what is equally unclear is the infomercial you just did for social media. You talked about Mr. Harper eliminating his own deficit, having inherited a massive surplus from Ralph Goodale. You talked about increasing the CBSA numbers of staff. That's a good thing. The CBSA was born in 2003 after 9/11, so it's not surprising if Mr. Harper became Prime Minister in 2006 and 7 and 8. The CBSA was ramping up the good work that they're doing. So we certainly are glad that Mr. Harper in those early years did that. It's too bad at the end of his government he decided to cut it. And again, Ms. Dancho, you keep repeating that. I hope you get a good clip. But I have said publicly, I said it at Mar-a-Lago, the Prime Minister repeated it, that of course we will be increasing the boots on the ground, to use your phrase, of the CBSA and the RCMP. And I want to be careful. You said that the RCMP have not redeployed resources or have not assigned new people. I have a lot of confidence in the decision that the Commissioner of the RCMP or the President of the CBSA will make on reassigning the appropriate police or law enforcement presence based on the threat that exists. And I've been assured by the Commissioner and the President that they absolutely are operationally ready to meet a potential threat. But the good news is we're going to work with them to ensure they have even more human resources. So there's the specific answer to your question. The answer was yes. We are going to increase the human resources, but we're also going to use technologies which can be very effective as well.
Thank you very much. And just in my accumulating seconds, I have full
Thank you, Ms.
confidence.
Sancho.
I have 15 seconds
No, we're
left.
actually
Yes,
over
I
by
do,
45
based on
seconds.
point of order. When the mic went live, I have 15 seconds remaining, so if you'll just allow me,
We're-
and then the
we're
minister
over.
can finish.
We're over
No,
by a minute.
It's 6 minutes. Oh, 5
It's
minutes.
5
You're
minutes.
right. My apologies. Thank you to the Commissioner and to the President. I do have full faith in you. It's your leadership, Minister, that I'm concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Damoff for 5 minutes.
Get 5 minutes and 45 seconds too, Chair. Minister, thank you for that last response. I keep hearing things from my Conservative colleagues, and I would say just because President-elect Trump says something doesn't necessarily make it true, and that's why, in my opinion, your trip down there to make sure that the incoming administration knows the facts about the border is really important. We've had conversations about the border my whole time as an MP. And, you know, I am personally really proud of the investments that we've made. You know, all I heard when we first came into office was about the cuts that were made under DRAP, the Debt Reduction Action Plan, across the board in government, but particularly in public safety, where you would think that the previous government would have made it a priority, because they talk about public safety all the time, Minister. We haven't talked about auto theft. And that's a place where actually the previous Harper government removed the scanner that was in Brampton to scan the containers that were at the intermodal terminal there. Our government convened a national summit on auto theft, and at the time, Peel Police Chief Nish actually said to me, I said, what can we be doing? And he said exactly this. So you know, I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about the investments that we've made in auto theft and the progress that we're making on a really complicated issue.
For that question, and I totally share your concern and the concerns of colleagues that have talked to me about this, about the rising levels of auto theft over the last number of months, over the last couple of years. You're right that we had convened a summit in Ottawa with law enforcement leaders from across the country and provincial and territorial ministers of public safety. Very happy that our colleagues from the larger provinces, Quebec and Ontario, for example, where your province of Ontario and our colleagues in Quebec, where this is an issue, participated. As I said in my opening remarks, the CBSA has done with partner police organizations based on the intelligence that they receive. Obviously, a lot of good work. 2,000 stolen vehicles already retrieved this year. The national trends may show a decrease, we hope, up to 17% in the first 6 months of 2024. Nationally, in Quebec, for example, there's been a 36% decline in stolen vehicles, but a decline from a high level is better than a continued increase, but it's certainly not where we want to get to. So recognizing that our work is not done in that regard, Ms. Damoff, we've made changes to the criminal code to provide additional tools for law enforcement and prosecutors to address auto theft. We've enhanced intelligence sharing and information sharing between municipal, provincial, and federal law enforcement agencies. The Commissioner has spoken to me and was recently at an Interpol meeting in Europe about the very good work the RCMP has done in terms of sharing information with Interpol and the number of foreign police checks at Interpol. He could, I'm sure, provide details for you in that regard. Scanning technologies. I've had an opportunity myself at an intermodal rail yard with some colleagues from Brampton to see a backscatter scanner, I think is the, you don't laugh, Commissioner, that's I think what it's called. It's called a bag, it's actually an RCMP scanner but no, the RCMP lent it to CBSA. There was an RCMP officer running the computer in it. But this scanner can drive beside containers, steel containers in an intermodal yard, and look at 2 containers high. And if it's marked tomato paste, but you see hubcaps and wheels like truck and car wheels, it doesn't look like tomato paste, on the screen in the backscatter scanner. So there's a whole bunch of interesting technologies that will help intercept the stolen vehicles before they get to the Port of Montreal. Much more efficient, much less expensive, and much more reassuring for the person to get their vehicle back than finding it buried 9 containers deep in a port, one of the busiest ports in the country. The president of CBSA has some information on precise technologies that I'm sure will interest all of you.
No, it was just to say we're testing those technologies at the rail yards and also looking what we can do with intelligence. And so acting on every piece of intelligence we receive from police of jurisdiction and passing them back any piece of intelligence we can. So it was just to say all 3 of them are yielding some of the results that we're seeing now.
Great, thank you. Madame Michaud, pour 2 minutes et demi.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le ministre, j'ai abordé la question tout à l'heure.
Thank you, Chair. Before you came, I raised the issue. It's 35 years now, the unfortunate anniversary of the Polytechnic tragedy. And your government, current and previous, promised a ban of assault-style weapons. You made that promise to victims, not only Polytechnic victims and survivors. We had what Bill Blair did in 2020, the order that banned 1,500 weapons. There was C-21, where there's definition of weapons that is evergreen. Do you think that this has allowed some hundreds of guns in circulation? What people are afraid of is that with the buyback program that you promised, people will be able to sell their prohibited weapons to the government. They will sell the weapons, take the money, and go buy a similar weapon that is still in circulation. So the control measure will be ineffective, and this is going to be a waste of public funds. So just like many other people, I expect you to reveal the first phase of the buyback program soon. Can we expect a total ban of assault-style weapons before implementation of this program? Ms. Michaud, thank you for your question. I share your concern. I totally agree with the way you ask your question when it comes to the concerns expressed. I had the opportunity, together with my colleague Jean-Yves Duclos and others, to meet on several occasions Nathalie and Heidi from Police Se Souvient. I am aware of the very tragic celebration that is coming on Friday. There's the gap list on the Blair list. I'm not trying to correct you. I just want to make sure that we understand what we're talking about. Phase 1 of the buyback program is to go look for those prohibited firearms, assault-style weapons that are in shops like Cabela's, shops that have those weapons. This process has already begun. The RCMP has pilot projects, tests have been done. The government has recovered some weapons already that are in the inventory of the retailers, and some rifles were destroyed. I saw the photograph of the first one that was destroyed after phase 1. You are right. Phase 2 is when we will go to the homes of individuals, and Sûreté du Québec and the police will help us. We will go look for those guns. They will be compensated. We will recognize that we have made illegal something that was legal before, so there's going to be compensation. For that, you are right. We could not have announced the next phase of the ban. It's an order in council that will come with the final list of prohibited weapons. That cannot be left open. When people will receive a check, they cannot go back to Cabela to buy a modern version of the firearm that we've just made illegal. So that is going to be a loophole that will be closed and shut down before people receive their money. In the coming days, I think I'll have something to say about that, about the next steps. We talked about a task force and technical team that will work with the RCMP, and that process is already underway. They have had meetings, a few meetings to date. I think there was one meeting last week. So I am aware of the deadlines you mentioned, and I am confident we will respect those deadlines, and I will be delighted to give you more details in the coming days, because you really supported what we tried to do together, you and Mr. McGregor, and before him, Peter Julian. You were important interlocutors. Thank you.
Minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, I had a very productive meeting with members of the Union of Canadian Correctional Officers in October. And also previously, a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to visit both the Mountain Medium Security Facility and the Kent Maximum Security Facility in British Columbia. So I've not only had a on-the-ground tour with members of USJE, but I've also had these productive meetings with the union representing correctional officers. And I know from those tours that even little things such as like the increased quality in food can have a dramatic effect on how the inmate population behaves. But, you know, I did hear a lot from both unions that there are some significant safety concerns. And I know from the virtual reality experience that UCCO put on, you know, it is a very unique working environment. And indeed, for both inmates and for the members of the public service who service those institutions, we want to make sure that they have a safe working environment. Now, I did ask Ms. Kelly about this, but I want this to stay focused just on you. They have some very real concerns about a safe working environment. They also have very real concerns about how their salary grid is being matched to other members, such as the RCMP. I'd like to know from you, Minister, how are you personally advocating for the members of the USJE and UCCO in making sure that their demands are met, given the unique challenges of their workspace?
Mr. McGregor, thank you for a thoughtful question. And again, in your preamble and as you pose the question, I am happy to ascribe myself entirely to the comments you made in terms of the good work that members of both these unions do in dangerous and difficult circumstances. I, too, saw the virtual reality presentation. I have visited, not in your province yet, hope to go in the coming weeks. I have had the privilege of visiting in many other parts of the country these correctional institutions. I've had in my constituency the Dorchester Penitentiary that opened in the 1880s, I think. Lawrence McCulley was a backbench MP when that facility opened. So I, as an opposition MP, as a government backbencher, would visit every year the Dorchester Institution, the Dorchester Penitentiary, Shepparton Healing Center, and see this remarkable work being done by these remarkable women and men. So I've said it to the Commissioner, I've said it to her colleagues every time I've had a chance to visit an institution, share totally your concern, and have heard directly every time I visit one of these institutions, Mr. McGregor, I too take time to meet with the elected union representatives at every one of these institutions. In a separate meeting the management, the staff, of course, visit the institution, but sit with the union representatives elected by those brave women and men who work there and hear their concerns. 2 weeks ago, I met the national representatives. La CSN and UCO were in collective agreement. We're in negotiating sessions. I'm looking at the commissioner. I want to make sure. I got good news. The president of the Treasury Board sent me a text on the weekend saying they've arrived at an agreement in principle with UCO. I don't know how much of this is public, but it is good news because they had talked to me about their concerns, exactly the issue of where they are in relation to the RCMP salaries. I don't know the details of the agreement, but I was told that at the bargaining table, they have arrived at an agreement in principle. The commissioner told me yesterday that there's still some more work to do. I may not have the right bureaucratic phrase, and the general agreement, the global agreement. I told her that was also a private jet that Bombardier made in Montreal, but I don't think that's it. So there's a global agreement, Mr. Chair, that the commissioner will hopefully finalize. But there is good news there, Mr. McGregor. And I'll finish with this because I see the chair is making, and I'm about to evacuate my chair here to go and see the leaders of the opposition. But one thing I think it's important, the women and men who work for the Correctional Service of Canada are in many ways the invisible partners. We talked a lot about CBSA. We talked a lot about the RCMP. CSIS, they have to be invisible. That's their business. If they're too visible, it goes badly. But the people who work for the Correctional Service do remarkable work in some of the most difficult circumstances. And I just wish Canadians like you and I could see this good work and appreciate the work that they do to keep the country safe. And I just wanted to say it publicly. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So we have 2 minutes left. I can give a minute to Mr. Shipley and a minute.
1 minute is very short. Thank you for being here today. Minister, after 9 years, we've heard a lot in this committee lately about crime and chaos being up across Canada. We know there's issues going on. I'm hearing it from Canadians. We've heard about some horrific issues in this committee. Part of that is because of our lax enforcement and border controls. Why did it take being called by the President-elect of the United States and threatening to take you out to the woodshed to get you to finally start talk about doing something about border control?
Mr. Chair, it won't surprise you that I don't agree entirely with the premise of our colleague's question. I thought I talked about the support that our government has given to the RCMP and the CBSA and the border enforcement, a lot of it in partnership with American colleagues, but it takes nothing away from, I think, the obligation at all times for the government to consider what additional measures we can take to support this work that's done. Some cases it's human resources, some cases it's technology. But I think we also have to be honest. When the incoming president of the United States threatens to put a 25% tariff on goods exported to the United States, we saw a 10% tariff some years ago on a sector of the Canadian economy, steel and aluminum, and the pain point that was. So this is a different order of magnitude. So a responsible government would, I hope, take every opportunity to show, as you noted in the question, the incoming administration, how seriously we take this issue and how we're prepared to step up in partnership with them. And 4 days after the President-elect's comments, the fact that we had dinner with him at his residence in Florida on a Friday of a holiday weekend,
Chair,
U.S. Thanksgiving weekend, we took as a positive
The answer's getting
sign.
a lot longer than I had the question.
No, sorry, Mr. Shipley, there was only a minute left. So we will let the minister leave the committee because it is 1 o'clock. But I am informed that Mr. Morris has a question for the officials.
Correct, yes. And Minister, if you'd like to stay, welcome to answer it to you. Commissioner Kelly, around half.
I apologize, Mr. Morris. You do
I believe
need.
there was one per side, so they had their one, and this is a one being offered. The chair already gave one.
By the clerk that if there's a minute left, which there is for Mr. McDonald, that time can be passed on to Mr. Morris to ask the question. Because it's theirs. It was their
time. They're offering me their time.
Morris, you have a minute.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, as you know, around half of those incarcerated in federal women's prisons are Indigenous. The Minister and I have spoken quite a bit about the Indigenous Community Corrections Initiative. One of the organizations that had applied for that funding is in my community. It's Healing of the Seven Generations. They applied back in July of 2023 to provide a program for healing and support for incarcerated Indigenous folks who are reintegrating into communities. They didn't hear back about their application until October of this year. The project was meant to start in January 1st of this year. My question to you is what can be done through CSC and potentially through Public Safety Canada to provide more timely responses to organizations like Healing of the Seventh Generation that I think we can both agree are doing really important work?
Well, thanks for the question. I'm not aware. I'll have to go back and look into it and get back to you on that.
Okay, yeah, I would appreciate that because for organizations like Healing of the Seven Generations, waiting 15 months for a response to their application, I think we should do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. So wait, colleagues, I see that everyone's backing up, but we still have to actually adopt the supplementary the budgets. So I see Mr. McGregor at the back. If he can come back. Mr. McGregor? And Mr. Motz. Yeah. So, yep. Do I have unanimous consent to group the motions for the adoption of the votes for the supplementary estimates B 2024, 2025, referred to our committee? Yes. On division. If yes, shall votes 1B and 5B under the Canada Border Services Agency, 1B under Canada Security Intelligence Service, votes 1B and 5B under Correctional Service Canada, votes 1B and 5B under the Department of Public Safety of Canada, vote 1B under Parole Board of Canada, votes 1B, 5B, 10B, and 15B under the Royal Canadian Mounted Police carry? Yes. On division. Should I report the votes to the House? Yes. Okay. Yeah. We're good? Okay. We're good. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Adjourned.
Yeah, that's it. If you didn't have it.
If I didn't have it.